right. Letting everybody in.
Thank you. Have fun, Ahmet. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon to the Verus Global Activation Session. My name is Craig Ross, CEO of Verus Global. Truly excited to be with the network of collaborative leaders around the world. We've got a special program ready for you. I truly believe that collaborative leaders are authentic leaders, among other things. And so I'm going to take the unique opportunity just to acknowledge the tragedies that have been occurring around our world in the last few weeks, whether it's in Texas or in New York or Southern California, Ukraine. And I just feel compelled to acknowledge that and encourage everyone to continue to do what you need to do to ensure your emotional, mental health and those that you are responsible for leading. This is an extraordinary time that we're living through. And one of the things I love about collaborative leaders, especially the leader that we have as our guest today, is we have the opportunity to transform every interaction. And when we do that, we build greater emotional, mental, if not spiritual health within our workplaces. And so excited to get going here, but I just want to acknowledge that. We've got a special program, Sherilyn Jane, the amazing Sherilyn Jane. You can't see her cape, but she does wear one. She's our producer today. She's going to give us some special instructions. Sherilyn, would you say a few words, please?
Yes, hi, welcome everyone. As you heard upon entry, we're recording. Please join the conversation in the chat and utilize the raise hand feature. Our time is short today, so if you do get the opportunity to speak, we just ask that you be brief.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sherilyn. Ethicon, one of the storied brands of the Johnson & Johnson company. You're likely aware of that. They do amazing things. They're currently transforming what surgery even looks like in an operating room. They also, of course, are transforming how patients heal, doing extraordinary work. A key player in leading that effort is Dr. Ahmet Tezel, who is Vice President of the R&D group within Ethicon. We're extraordinarily fortunate to have Ahmet with us today as we explore accelerating product speed to market by developing a greater culture of candor. Mr. Tezel, would you please say hello to the collaborative leaders around the world?
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I've known Craig and Verus Global for 10 years. They made a huge impact on me personally and the teams that I work with. So really looking forward to the next hour.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ahmet. Ahmet, I see the sign behind you, Believe. I don't know if that's strategic. I know you're in a traveling office right now, so it's not even your typical spot, but is there a story behind the Believe sign behind you?
It's not, I mean, it's not, it's everywhere in our building. So it's a Ted Lasso, that's why it's crooked. I'm sure everyone is familiar with Ted Lasso. We're trying to do extraordinary innovation in this campus in California. So we have lots of Believe signs, and sometimes executives will walk around with the Ted Lasso costume. So we're getting ready for that too.
Very good. Excellent. Appreciate you sharing that. Ahmet, why is this topic important? It's something that's near and dear to your hearts. I would consider you a transformative leader. Your results speak for themselves. The data is there. Why is this topic important to you?
I mean, I would say candor is a huge piece of culture, and in innovation, getting the culture right is often underappreciated, but I think incredibly critical. So when I define how you can create a successful R&D organization, and I don't think it's different in any industry, when you're working on innovation, you kind of need to get three things really right. First, you have to have the right people around you. That's critical. Then you have to have the right processes, procedures to be able to do innovation. But then the third piece is culture, and the culture piece is always tricky because it's not very easy to quantify. And innovators, scientists, engineers, doctors, they're always trained to make decisions based on tangible, quantifiable data. So sometimes we underappreciate the impact of culture because we can't quantify it. But without that third piece of culture, I think it's very difficult to be very successful. And candor is a key piece of the culture.
A key piece of culture. I'm looking forward to building on the wisdom you just shared. Of course, I'm definitely biased to share your perspective. I know several of the collaborative leaders we have joining us today, both in person and with the recording later, probably share that perspective. When you think about candor, these are some definitions that we've just picked up, over the last 25 years. It keeps getting refined. I won't insult the teams that are the leaders that are with us today by reading these slides, but what you see on the screen, Ahmet, which is particularly important to you and is necessary as it relates to this accelerating speed to market with our products?
I can't pick one. I think they're all critical. Maybe I can add one, and that is, I think when it's most effective is you do all these things, but you do it in a way where using a Verus Global tool, the energy map, you do it on the front side of the energy map. And you don't equate candor of just dropping what's not working and venting. I think that has limited impact. The most effective way of candor, I think, in innovation is when you call out the truth, but you also, on the front side of the energy map, provide what you need to do, the solutions, the suggestions, the validations. That's, I think, could be added to this slide. Like, where is your energy when you are truthful and candid?
Got it. Ahmet Tezel is referring to one of the Verus Global tools, the energy map, which is about understanding where's my focus and where do I need it to be in relationship to the emotional energy that comes with that focus. Ahmet, thank you for underscoring that. I'm also struck by the emphasis, and my question for you, Ahmet, is this: there's such an emphasis on, hey, have the candid conversation. And oftentimes I hear leaders say, hey, we got to get better at having the difficult conversation. And I've often wondered, aren't we psyching ourselves out here if we start calling it the difficult conversation, the candid conversation, like it's singular, versus what you've been emphasizing, hey, let's create a culture of candor. Looking for my question here, I guess it'll simply be, is that significant to you? What's important there as it relates to emphasizing the cultural component versus just that conversation?
Yeah, I think if hopefully I got your question right. I think if you just emphasize telling the truth, telling the facts, you might miss getting it right, in the sense that you do need to create an environment of psychological safety, for example. So when the truth telling is happening, what is my experience as an employee, as an associate, in telling the truth? So if I'm just told, tell the truth, give me the hard facts, and when I do that, the experience is not a good experience. Next time I'll do it a little less. So I think you can't just advocate for candor. You got to create the surrounding cultural pieces that enables that candor to be.
That's where we're going today in our short, that's where we're going with our short time together today, making sure that we all walk away further equipped with the ability to do what Ahmet Tezel just identified as a priority. Let's take a quick poll. Let's engage the Collaborative Leader Network. And this anonymous, of course, Sherilyn's posting the poll as we speak. How would you rate your culture of candor right now? I see Ahmet leaning forward. He's even going to participate. Yeah. This is, of course, anonymous. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Ahmet, when we have the data in front of us, looking forward to your perspective. And of course, a reminder to everybody, you can participate in the chat space as well, as Sherilyn pointed out. She'll highlight whether there's questions or points of emphasis All right, there we go. See the data in front of us. Ahmet, what is the insight you might have or a perspective you see as you look at the data?
I mean, I'm not terribly surprised. I don't have a general idea of who's on the phone on the call right now, but I presume it's a broad group of people from different companies and organizations. But I think this is something that every organization struggles in getting right. You know, I've been in many different organizations, and that for different reasons, the candor level is different. Sometimes when you're candid, you get a negative feedback. That's why you're not candid. And in certain organizations, being candid is viewed as you're hurting others' feelings or you're putting people on the spot. And for that reason, even if you feel psychologically safe, you don't say things because you don't want to hurt others' feelings or other functions. So it's a very complicated topic to get right. And I think this poll just kind of scored that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. At many levels, it's a topic that's difficult to get right, which, at the risk of being a bit redundant, underscores your earlier point of building, I'll use the word conditions, the conditions for candor to occur. Let's take the next step then and explore the relationship between candor and speed to market. I'm curious to know if you have a specific example for us over your many years of leading innovation, and how building that culture of candor has in fact a direct link to the ability to drive differentiated value to the market.
Sure. I mean, for me, obviously, I won't talk about company names, but I was part of an organization that was really struggling. You know, I would say about a decade ago, and there, when I joined, there was not a lot of candor because the messengers were being shot. And you know, when you told the truth, it was a negative experience for you. So people rightfully stopped telling the truth. So there was not a lot of information flow within the organization. And when you don't have a lot of information flow up and down, you cannot get speed to market. That group moved from that to, okay, it's psychologically safe, so I'm just going to vent. And that is better than the first scenario, but still it wasn't aligned with the ambitions of the organization in terms of speed to market, because people were just venting the problems, telling the problems, and there was problems everywhere. And it was helpful, but not that helpful. And then that organization very successfully moved into, okay, here's the truth, and here's what I'm doing about it. And again, it goes back to the energy map. If my energy is just to tell the truth and the problems, and I view my role as that's it, you know, you're helping the organization, but not that much. But if you come to the table and say, these are the problems, and this is what I'm going to do about it, then your impact is exponentially higher. And I saw that transformation in an organization that is now, you know, world-class in what they do.
Got it. I appreciate that, Ahmet. And the question I have for you is, when people began in that process to become more candid, what was that curve like, if you will? You know, I'd like to know about momentum. Is it a practicing? Is it incremental? And what accelerates that pace of growing that culture of candor?
Something that we did, and I see a few people that I recognize from that organization on the call. Something that we did was early on, when the right behavior was happening in the room, we called it out. So again, when the right behavior was up. So when someone was giving bad news, we thanked them for it. We said thank you. And then, you know, if they weren't moving to the front side of their injury, we will ask questions. So, okay, great. And what would you do? But if they did both already, we call that out too. And then when the wrong behaviors happen, obviously we didn't do it publicly, but we will coach the individual on the side and say, hey, look, you know, you did great. You told the truth, but how about this? So I think calling the behaviors out is in a good way, when positive behavior is exhibited, is one of the tricks in kind of calling out what's right, so everyone watches and say, okay, this is what the management, this is what the leadership wants, versus hoping that others notice. I think that's something we can all do better. Whatever our cultural goals are, if it's candor, when that good behavior is in the room, you celebrate it. And then I think then people watch and say, okay, that's what we need to do.
I'm underscoring that. The network of leaders that you have, both in your current organization and former organizations, one of the things that I think is worth calling out is you have within you this desire to make others the hero. And I think that's really key when it comes to giving feedback. It's not this giving feedback because I'm trying to get you to see it. You and those in your network have this desire to truly celebrate brilliance around you and make others the hero. And I'm not asking you a question here. I can see your smile. Makes you a little uncomfortable when I celebrate you like this, but it's a key component to doing what you said in this spirit of giving feedback. I want to celebrate you and the leaders around you.
Thank you.
And then challenge ourselves as leaders, as effective as we may be at doing what Ahmet's talking about and developing these cultures of candor so we can accelerate speed to market. What's possible if we can just improve that 10% more? This is a question that if you share this activation session with other colleagues or not, we should be asking this question. What does that look like? It automatically often brings people, okay, so how do we do that? How do we do that? We're going to build upon Ahmet's experience and some of the stories that he has to share with us today. And I want to emphasize in terms of what Verus Global is doing in the world. You'll see in the language there, aligning teams. And one of the things that collaborative leaders like Ahmet, they're doing is this going beyond just aligning people to the deliverable, the business imperative, if you will, and aligning us as humans, connecting us as humans. Speaking with one of the leaders in Ahmet's organization yesterday, she said, Craig, this group is trying to bring pen and pencil to our governance, pen and pencil to our ways of working. And then she added this, but you cannot pen and pencil relationships. And she was demonstrating this wisdom around the type of alignment that we're speaking about today. As we move through our very brief time, our purpose of this activation session is to ensure we're all walking away further equipped to create that culture of candor by just 10%. We're going to focus on leading ourselves and others. We're going to focus on this tool called the Big R, what it looks like to model it, and of course, develop it in others. Sherilyn, as I transition, I haven't been monitoring our chat space. You know me, I get too excitable here. And so is there anything I should be aware of chat space? Any questions for Ahmet or myself before I transition to another poll?
Yeah, we actually just got one in from Robin Blackstone.
Excellent. Robin, would you like to take yourself off mute and share your question or thought?
Yeah, I had a question. It seems like questions are really a key strategy in establishing that candor conversation. What are the questions that really help to do that? And how can you use those to really draw people to the right side of the energy map in this conversation?
Beautiful question, Robin. Thank you. Ahmet, your thoughts on that?
I just want to say good morning, Robin. Robin is our Chief Medical Officer and one of my favorite persons at Ethicon. So good to see you. I didn't know you were here. I think questions like, and there's another tool for that in the Verus Global system, questions triggered in mind. It's an incredible, I think you're spot on. It's an incredible way of, I think, leading, saying what's important, why it's important, and then asking the person for their input creates enormous engagement versus just being a declarative leader. For me, it's always been challenging for me to connect with people, because people who don't know me, I'm 6'4", I'm pretty tall. People tell me all the time I'm extremely intimidating when they first meet me. So if I don't engage with questions, it becomes very difficult, especially if I have positional authority in the room. it becomes very difficult to have a collaborative relationship. It becomes very hierarchical. So one tool that I use or try to use, and every year I try to do 10% more, is that asking questions. I think on any topic, you call that candor, but asking questions and getting that input, and then trying to truly listen is the key there, versus just asking and preparing your own next steps. I think that is a key tool that helps me all the time.
Love that question, Robin, and Ahmet's pointing at something that I'd like to underscore as well, that questions that mobilize hearts and minds are questions that build certain types of awareness. Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence guru, talks about the fact that you can change behaviors by building awareness. And so the questions I'm fond of, Robin, that I've seen you and Ahmet and others ask are the questions that say, hey, what is the experience we're having right now? What's the experience we want to have right now? What is the truth that is unspoken? And how can we speak to that truth in a way that is safe and builds the awareness we need? And so with Ahmet and other collaborative leaders, there's a facilitation of awareness as it relates to the types of questions that are being asked. Robin, thank you for speaking up and asking the question you just asked. You're reminding me of some pretty important ideas here. I appreciate that. Let's engage our collaborative leaders network even further here. Before we explore this next tool then, what gets in the way? What are some of the symptoms that show up when we don't have a culture of candor? You can see the poll in front of you. Again, it's anonymous. We'd love to have your participation. What are symptoms that exist within a culture? As we see these come in, Ahmet, looking forward to your thoughts again on perhaps some that you've experienced or any that you'd add. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. All right, definitely a trend towards slower, poor decision making. Also see lower risk taking. Cultures of innovation, we know the importance of risk taking. Ahmet, you've talked about with leaders that you've been, teams that you've been a part of, the importance of risk taking. But where does your mind go, Ahmet? What's an insight you have there?
Yeah, I voted for meetings after meetings, and also it's sometimes pre-meetings. Before the real meeting, you do pre-meetings because that's where you tell the truth with smaller group, and then you go to the big group and you don't. I voted for that one because that's the one that personally frustrates me the most. But I completely agree with the slow and poor decision making. I think that's the result of lack of candor as well. But there are other reasons for slow and poor decision making, but the meeting after meeting is a very specific to me about when candor is low, when you do discussions in smaller groups. That's why I voted that one. But I think all of them, if there was a answer that said all of the above, that's the one I would.
I appreciate that. In the spirit of Robin Blackstone and what questions can we ask? One of the things that was just with a different organization several weeks ago, and one of the participants actually asked, we were talking about symptoms, barriers, and a participant actually with true sincerity, they were truly curious when they asked this question: how long do we want to talk about the symptoms and the barriers before we get serious about breaking these barriers? How long? Because we tend to see in organizations repetitiveness in terms of talking about the symptoms as opposed to doing honest work, which is what we're going to do right now. We're going to focus on, first of all, ourselves, leading self, of course, what it means to model this trait, this quality that allows us to bring more candor. And then we'll, of course, transition to building this in others. I'd like to invite our network of collaborative leaders to participate in the chat space, if you would. I'd like to set this up by asking what qualities are present when two or more people have a healthy relationship with one another. I'm going to ask that again. When people are, they're connected, when there's affinity, they're working well together, what are qualities or traits that show up? Love to see your answers in the chat space, please. Greg said trust. Jake is saying trust as well. Trust. Okay, Emily, mutual respect. I appreciate that. You challenge one another. Justin, I appreciate your response there. That resonates for me as well. Simone said acceptance. No judgment. Nicole, that makes sense. A vulnerability. Rob, Corey, compromise. They're flying in. I don't think Zoom allows us to. It probably does, but I'm just not fast enough with it. But if we could capture, and maybe Sherilyn, would capture this if there's any way, you think about these relationships, the qualities that we have with one another. Well, one of the things that we've discovered, and by the way, it's in our 30 years of work, but most importantly, it's the study of the research, the literature that's out there, that individuals who can demonstrate this candor actually also carry those qualities over to themselves. In other words, right now as a participant, if you look in the chat space, ask yourself, of those qualities, how many of those qualities transfer over to the relationship that I have with myself? I trust myself. I challenge myself. I can be vulnerable with myself. I'm honest with myself. We found that those individuals who can do that, those moments when we can do that, they're demonstrating what we call a big R. And a big R stands for that relationship, specifically a healthy relationship with oneself. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher several thousand years ago, once said, it's amazing how much we invest in relationships with others, yet how little we spend in building a relationship with ourselves. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But I think that calls out beautifully the importance of actually, wow, this relationship that I have with myself. Ahmet, you're familiar with the big R. You and I have had several conversations about the big R. Where would you like to go with the conversations? The first part of my question, specifically, do you have an example of where you've had to demonstrate your own big R as it relates to being more candid?
I mean, constantly, this is something I struggle with. I would say a more general answer for me was early on in my career, I had roles that weren't matched by my experience. And so I was very early promoted on. And that really created challenges for me with my big R. So, I had small R's because I didn't have the experience and the belief, the trust in myself, those words that were in the chat room. And that impacted how I showed up. But this is something, the other comment I'll make is that this is something I think it's hard to be consistent as an individual with your big R. Like, I think there's days where, I have a big R and there's days where I have a small R. And, again, maybe the trick here is to have less small R days each year and do that 10% improvement, but also not to get exceptionally hard on yourself when you do have a small R moment. But I say it's very hard to be consistently a big R person, at least for me.
Well, I think that if we were to take a poll on that, a lot of folks would agree with you. I know I concur. It's a daily challenge and a daily opportunity. One of the things that we talk about, those conditions within the culture, then that Ahmet again is emphasizing here, is now we have a common language. I know with the team that I'm a part of and honored to be a part of, I will actually, in those moments where I'm feeling insecure, I'm not having confidence, those situations, I'll actually now, because I know the team has my back, I can actually say, hey, I'm experiencing a small R right now. And in these moments, these are some of the signals I can actually send to a team. This is what I'm experiencing. Sherilyn, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here. Sherilyn, when a teammate actually signals they have a small R, what does that do for you as a part of the language? What response does it evoke for you as it relates to even candor, perhaps?
Yeah, I think with that awareness, it allows the team and myself to meet that person where they are in that moment, and to treat it with, treat them with care and have a little bit more empathy. when they're vulnerable and saying, I'm having a small R right now, that helps us understand, okay, we need to be a little bit more sensitive, with this topic, and identify ways that we can help build their big R.
Ahmet, given what Sherilyn just said, when we started this business, 30 years ago, I remember our founder and I, we were out for a hike, and we had this thought that the higher you go in an organization, the bigger the big R's. Yeah, I mean, this would just there'd be a correlation between the size of a person's big R and the level of their leadership in an organization. As we moved into, had gained more experience, we actually found that that's not the case. Sherilyn just used the words being vulnerable and declaring, I'm having a small R moment. Why is that difficult? First of all, do you share that perspective?
Yeah, I want to tell a personal story from this week.
Okay.
For me, a small R moment. So I went out to dinner with one of our senior leaders, and I always ask for feedback from him. He's someone I trust. So I told him, give me one good thing, one bad thing. I want to hear it. So he gave the good thing, and he's like, on the bad thing, he said, why are you holding back in meetings? He said, I think you're waiting for that very top job before you are you.
Wow.
And I said, you're right, I have a small R. And he goes, what is that? So he didn't know, of course. So I'm like, yeah, that's a small R. But it was very profound. And when I saw this slide, it's just popped in me that it is how we show up. If we're not really have a big R in that day, it impacts me. So I'll say one less thing in a meeting, or I'll push a little less on a topic when I'm thinking about overthinking, like what's the impact, how would I be perceived, and it kind of takes the truth out of you of who you are, and just dial it down a tiny bit, and then your impact is, even though you dialed it down a little bit, your impact is substantially reduced. And so when I saw this slide, it just made me, it was Tuesday. I'm like, yeah, it happens.
Ahmet, thank you for modeling for the rest of us that sort of vulnerability that a big R person, of course, is more capable. And I keep getting it wrong there. I got to be careful. A big R person, a big R moment, because you've emphasized to us, and I want to reinforce that this is not a big R person, small R person. These are moments for us. And how do we more consistently demonstrate those big R's, the big R relationship with ourselves? Sherilyn, I want to go to you before I transition. Next slide, chat. Anything we want to draw attention to? Any questions for Ahmet?
Yeah, Bridget just had asked, what are some kinds of things that take you to a small R place? Do you have any other examples besides Ahmet's?
Ahmet, I have one. I'll go first and we'll see what you got. I think whenever my ego feels threatened, where I'm not getting credit, I've worked my tail off or something, and the whole team is celebrating somebody else. My ego inside saying, "Hey, wait a minute." When I get feedback that isn't consistent with my perspective, constructive feedback that isn't consistent with my perspective, my small R wants to immediately go to an excuse. Yeah, but you don't understand. And so let me give you the context. Big R situation, I'm able to say, thank you. What else should I know about that? Ahmet, how about for you?
I would say observing myself and others. So I'll put myself, one of the small R moments, or what happens is if you put your career aspirations and your goals ahead of the moment, like if you're saying something or not saying something based on how it will impact how you're viewed and how that will impact your career, that very quickly makes you do different things or say different things. So I observed that a lot throughout my career. To me, that's a very small R moment. I would see, including myself or someone else, say something that is kind of career focused, not the right moment for that topic.
You're reminding me of a leader I met within a major automobile manufacturer, and meteoric rise. I mean, incredible in terms of what he is doing with his career. And I once asked, what's the secret to your success? He thought about it for a moment, and he said, Craig, the organization and other people can't take away from me what I value most. And I see so many people trying to manage their career and protect things, politic, right? Position versus just being that big R that you're reminding us of, Ahmet. I appreciate that. I'm grateful for the question, Sherilyn, that was in the chat space.
Yeah, I think Jayun Akshay has a great question.
Let's hear. What did you say, Jayun?
Yeah.
Perfect, Jayun. You want to take yourself off mute?
Yeah.
Let me hear your question.
And camera. And take off camera.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my question is like, I mean, in your organization, I guess you had or have leaders with smaller in general, let's say, maybe not all the time, but in general. So how do you coach them? What do you do? What do you do like to actually take them on the bigger side?
Jayun, thank you for speaking up. Ahmet, your thoughts on that?
No, you're first.
It's a big question, Jayun. I'm going to go with two quick responses, then I want to hear from you. Number one, I first have to manage my own big R around that leader. Big R people are autonomous and independent of the size of the R of the people around them. And sometimes when people are small R around me, I want to go small R myself. And so that's where it starts for me. And then number two, I'm going to leverage Ahmet's coaching earlier, is find those moments when they are big R and then give them that feedback and acknowledge and emphasize that. The mind goes towards its focus, knowing that that's not going to immediately transform them or the situation, but it reinforces where we want to go. I'm really curious. You made me go first.
Yeah, so I had time to think.
Yeah.
I first of all, I think it's a great question, and good to see you, Jayun. It's super hard, like, to deal with that, but I would echo what you said, Craig. Something that I try to get better at is not just to compartmentalize that moment versus saying that person is small r. Is it easy to do? No, but then, in that moment, not to, again, another Verus Global tool, not to doofus them and say, oh, here we go again, another small moment. Is that easy? A small R moment? Is that easy to do? Not for me, but I know I should do less of it. That will be my answer. So when someone exhibits small R behavior and I see it again, I say, here we go again. And then my brain kicks in, like, you're doofusing the person, you're doing confirmation bias, and I kind of catch myself. But it's a constant challenge. And I know it's not a good answer, Jayun, but that's the struggle I have. I try to do less, even though it's very difficult.
Jayun, your question inspires another point here. Thank you, Ahmet. And a quick message to our producer, Sherilyn. I'm going to go ahead, given our time. I'm loving this discussion. As everybody, well, those who have worked with Verus Global know, we're not bound by agendas, we're bound by value. And so I'm going to go to this slide right here, methods for building big R's in others. This was Jayhun's question. And then Ahmet, as you look at that list here, I'm not going to read it. I'd like for people to read that themselves. Is there one that you'd like to underscore, given Jayhun's important question?
Probably the top one would be one, and then you mentioned it. I'm looking if it is here, but acknowledge. Yeah. So I think acknowledging the positive behaviors and calling out the good in that person does help that person's R. So I would say those. Suspending your own judgment about the person and seeing it as a moment versus its general, and then acknowledging the good moments.
How many times do we see this? I guess see it because I'm culpable of this, where someone will have a small R moment and I take myself out of the game by judging them. They're wrong, they're bad. And the moment I move to judgment, I begin to cloud the data because I'm emotional. And I've actually disabled myself as an effective leader. I really appreciate that we're emphasizing this first one, Jehun, virtual knuckles to you, man, because this is so critical. Temptation to want to change them versus saying, hey, wait a minute, I got to stay in the game here with my own big R. Now, I believe you said there was another, you called and someone else had a question. You're producing this for us as well. Cheryl Lynn, this guy, he's creeping. Wait a minute, we've got big R's, don't we, Cheryl Lynn? We can let him produce as well.
Yep.
Ahmet, did you see someone you wanted to call on?
No, that was Jehun.
There was, okay. I thought there might've been somebody else. All right.
No.
Cheryl Lynn, anybody else in the chat space before I take the next step here?
Yeah, Emily had asked a question. What are some ways that you can immediately change from a small R moment? And I had responded in the chat that asking questions is a great way to do that. Craig, do you have any other comment? Do you have any other advice?
Is the question about like when you have a small R moment?
Yeah, so like to immediately shift your mindset when you're having a small R moment.
Oh, I'll tell the tool I use all the time. I think about my blessings. So when I have a smaller moment, I think about my family, my daughters, my wife, my country. I'm Turkish, good things about that. And it like shifts my energy, and then I can exit easier. That's a tool I definitely use all the time.
Yeah. Ahmet, thanks for that reminder. Virtually impossible for us as human beings to be in a state of gratitude and be angry. Virtually impossible, because we go towards our focus, can only focus on one thought at a time. I appreciate that reminder. It's a really profound question. And so I think one of the things, given what Ahmet shared with us earlier and Robin reinforced, even asking myself, I'm just going to reinforce that, asking myself my own questions. What's the experience I want to have right now? What's most important to me? What are my values? And how do I want to model and demonstrate those values in this moment? Oftentimes are the questions that I ask myself, including I just got home from some travel last night. It's sometimes easy for me to have a small R when I come home at the end of the day and my family gets my leftovers because I'm small R. I'm taking this huge inventory of all the work I have to do, being victim to my calendar, as opposed to asking myself my questions. Well, how do I want to be present for my family at this moment? With the energy that I do have left at the end of the day, how do I want to utilize that in service to my family? That would be my response, Sherilyn. Ahmet, does that trigger anything for you? I'm seeing a smile on your face. Thoughts on that? Particularly as it relates to family?
Yeah, no, I was just listening to you. I think it's very similar. And I saw John commented that he utilizes the blessing too. So it was like, glad to hear that. It's a widely used tool, that it's not just me.
Yeah, critical one. So then a person with a big R is empathetic and emotional state of others. There's a connection, and I'm going to start to bring us towards the close of our valuable time together. And you can begin to see the connections, and there's many connections. Cheryl, in a moment ago, demonstrator talked about that, the importance of empathy. You had underscored the importance of psychological safety. And so this is, again, how we can create the conditions. I'm at consensus style decision-making. And big R's, how do you have an example of how we, by demonstrating bigger R's, we can get away from the need to all agree every single time before we make a decision? Connection for you there?
Yeah, I think if people that consistently have big R's, they're comfortable with the joy of missing out, the JOMO, and they're less fear of missing out. And that helps. So one thing we're working actively in our organization is, do we view inclusion as everybody's opinion is equal and everyone's opinion is critical? Because if we have small R's, that's the organization you will create. Everyone's opinion has to matter, and everyone's opinion is critical for this decision. But if we act with big R's, we can run very complex programs and projects in smaller subsets of groups. And then, if I have a big R, I'm comfortable that I wasn't in that meeting. I'm comfortable that I wasn't in that decision. So there's definitely a connection between consensus, opinions, how inclusion is defined, and small and big R moments for the leaders that are involved in those decisions.
I appreciate that, Ahmet. Given that I've had the privilege of participating in that discussions, just to be clear, that not everybody's opinion matters as it relates to every decision that needs to be made for that topic or decision.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Really appreciate that definition of inclusion. Of the common themes that we see come up over and over is, wow, I feel like I belong and I feel as though I'm valued.
Exactly. I think as organizations, that's the role. Like, as long as I feel I have a strong belonging and I'm valued in this organization, and if I have a big R, then me not being in the room doesn't impact me for the decisions that my background might not be helpful in contributing. But if I don't have those conditions set, it becomes very difficult. Then you feel the need to be in the room. You feel the need to be always on every email.
Sherilyn, I think we need to add that to the definitions of big R that they demonstrate. What do you call it, Ahmet? JOMO? Joy of missing out?
Joy of missing out.
Joy of missing out. Okay. Raising the bar with the acronyms. One more, a big R means that you welcome dissenting opinions, excuse me. And of course, this underscores and reinforces the conversation we just had regarding inclusion and certainly optimizing the talent within the team and organization.
Hey, can I make a comment on that, in that last comment? Yeah. Something I learned from you, and I credit for you, is when you're giving that dissenting opinion, how you say it is extremely important in maintaining the other person's big R. So if I say, let's say I'm in disagreement, if I say, Craig, you're wrong, you did an action that kind of challenged the big R of that person. But if I say, Craig, I have a different perspective, then you can still bring the same comments, but you didn't challenge the big R of the person and push that person to have a small R. So that's a little tool that always helps me. So thank you.
Appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'm gauging, as Sherilyn said, meeting where people are there, where they're at. If we're sensing they're fragile, a fragile moment, using those words perspective versus declaring they're wrong. Appreciate that. Beautiful application. Speaking of application, everyone has a challenge. You can see it there in the screen. Identify a person who would benefit from a greater big R. Identify, wow, okay, how will we build their big R? We had the list posted earlier. And then the challenge for everybody is, of course, to take action within the next 5 business days. We cannot afford as collaborative leaders for this to remain simply rhetorical. We must operationalize this. Our opportunity is 10% more. There's an example on the screen of what that might look like. And as Ahmet said, 10% more, 10% more, 10% more. I'm going to be coming back to you, Ahmet, here in just a moment, identifying what's most important for you as a takeaway. What's perhaps an insight, and where do you want to go with demonstrating a big R? Sherilyn, I'd love for you to participate in that as well. Though first, an invitation to those that are part of our huddle or this activation session today. Would love to have a conversation with you as it relates to how your team can further activate, create this culture of candor to drive greater speed in delivering the value you have to the market. We have an amazing teammate, the amazing Jamie Conklin, who is service-oriented and can explore what it means to perhaps have your organization experience this and the value that might be gained in doing so. Sherilyn, I believe you're chatting, putting in the chat space some contact information.
Yeah, actually, Carrie posted a link in there for us.
Perfect. Ahmet, I'm going to stop sharing and express gratitude to you and Sherilyn and certainly the collaborative Leaders Network that's joined us. I'd like to ask Sherilyn to share perhaps some insights and where you might be applying what we've discussed today. And then Ahmet, I'd like to close with you saying your insights as well, sharing your insights as well. Sherilyn?
Yeah, I think Emily's question about how can we shift our mindset when we're having a small arm moment, that just kind of reminded me that I need to be, aware of how I'm responding and take time to, take time to think about my reactions and ask myself those questions of, how am I responding? And Craig, I liked your ad about who do I want to be in this moment?
Nice, excellent. Thank you for sharing. As we transition to Ahmet, for me, it's being around. I'm reminded when I'm around leaders like Ahmet, how important it is just to be ourselves. Big R people are comfortable with who they are. Ahmet, you have tremendous influence in the organization you're in, the organizations you've been in. And you model an authenticity and a comfort level that reminds us all that we can do more of the same, and not just our organization and results, but our world will be better for it. Thank you, Ahmet. Ahmet, final words are yours.
I can't finish after that. You did such a good job. So I would say the only thing I would add is on the big R, like, don't be too hard on yourself. Just try to do less small R moments versus, getting too hard on yourself. So that will be the only thing I would add. But it's so important to recognize where you are and recognize where the other person is in that moment to get a positive outcome. It's very difficult to get a positive outcome if either you or the other person is having a small R moment. So try to work on that for yourself and the other person if you want that positive outcome. I think that's underappreciated sometimes. And we just go to the facts, the decision, and we take out the emotional piece out, and then it's difficult to make a decision based on facts and data.
Perfectly put. Thank you so much, Ahmet. Thank you to the collaborative leaders who always remember that leadership matters, but only teams deliver. Thank you, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you in next month's activation session. Thank you for leading forward. Ahmet Tezel, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take good care. Bye-bye, everybody.